Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video. So, most of you won't know this, but here in Ireland we have a small maker community called Irish Makers Unite. So this year, coming up to the festive season, a few of the guys from the community decided that it'd be fun if we did a secret Santa within the community. So, rules are simple. You get issued the name of another fellow maker and a little blurb about some stuff that they're into, and your job is to take that information and your maker skills and make them a secret Santa present to be delivered at some date in December. So I got issued a maker named Chris, who, among other things, is really into coffee and Warhammer 40k, specifically the Blood Angels. So I have a couple of ideas. I think I'm going to tackle the coffee part first, and then I have an idea for the Warhammer bit as well to tie it all together. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to make Chris's secret Santa present. So yeah, let's go make it, and you guys can follow along. So to complement Chris's love of coffee, I've decided that I'm going to make him a set of laminated hardwood coasters. I'm going to make I think I'm going to make 6 coasters in total. I want to keep one of them, and then I want to give him a set of 4 that he can have on, say, his kitchen table, and then one little bit extra special one that he can use on his desk. It'll be his personal one, and that's the one that I'm planning on tying into the Warhammer 40k theme, but we'll see that a little bit later on. For now, we'll just get started with making the coasters. I decided to go with this white and dark piece. I thought the sizes would work out well if I flipped over the light piece and cut it into strips, and then I could cut long ways down the white piece, and that would give me the right thickness, so they'd be kind of nominally about the right size and be easier to process them down without losing too much material when I had to flatten the whole thing out. Okay, so we're over to the table saw next to cut our strips. This is something I don't usually like doing because my table saw is not very good. I think I do need to replace the blade on it, and cutting hardwood strips like this can be a little bit tedious, and also it doesn't leave a great saw cut finish on the edges. So there's a good bit of cleanup that has to be done, but it's the only real way I have of doing this. I don't have a bandsaw or anything like that for like kind of more fine resawing, so this is my only option really. Okay, so just off the saw, this is the pattern that we're going to be using. So you see the 2 wider white strips in the middle, and then the dark wood sandwiching that. So that's what it's going to be. So the thing now is I need to just clean up the edges of some of this so that the glue joint will be a little bit easier. So I'm just going to do some sanding on the edge of that, and then I'm going to lop these in half, and then what will happen is we'll laminate this in 2 lengths so that it'll fit over on my jig over there, where it'll then get thickness with the router, and that'll be it then really. That's the main bulk of the thing. Then we just have to slice them all up, sand them, finish them, all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to get these a little bit cleaned up, cut them in half, and then we'll lay them up for gluing, and then we'll come back in a couple of days to do the leveling and stuff like that. So a little bit of sanding, a little bit of planing here will get my edges ready for the glue up. I also then have to cut these down to length, so I cut them in half. You'll see later on when I have my jig set up for the flattening, it won't handle the very long pieces. So if I cut them in half and make 2 sort of laminated boards, that'll be easier to flatten, and then it'll just be easier to handle them that way so that I can cut them up into the individual coasters at the end. Onto the glue up now. The first thing I usually do for a glue up is I will take a nice flat surface, in this case just a very thin piece of plywood. I'll cover it in tape, thick, just wide masking tape here, just so that when I clamp and with all the glue squeeze out on the bottom, it won't stick to anything. You can just peel the tape off quite easily. And that's it really. So that's the prep, and then actually doing the glue up is pretty simple. It's just strips of wood. Brush the glue on, make sure to get like complete coverage over each piece, and then just lay them up in the pattern that you want. So I was going with this alternating light and dark, and that's it really. So once our glue is applied, we just need to clamp it in place. I'm using 2 of these quick release clamps just to put pressure on from either side to compress that glue. And then it's obviously on the workbench, so it's a relatively flat surface, and then I pile a whole bunch of weights on top of it to press it down to hopefully stop it from warping. Ideally, I would have some more clamps to do this, but I actually didn't have enough clamps the right size. So this, though, worked fine and ended up getting a very good result out of it.
Okay, so we've got our boards all cut to length, laid up, glued, and now all clamped up. So I've got some big weight plates up here. There's about 20 kilos there, which is pressing down on the board to try and keep it flat. Well, it's really more just to counteract the forces that the clamps put on it from the sides, which tend to make it want to bow. So hopefully that'll help it keep it a little bit flat, but it doesn't really matter. We just really want to keep it nicely together because when we stick it into our jig over here, that's going to be what ultimately flattens it out. But the flatter you can start with, the better. So that is everything for right now. I basically need to leave this for a couple of days now for the glue to set, and then I can come back out and I can flatten it, cut it to length, and then do all the nice final finishing bits on it. Okay, so we have our lamination all done. So we've got these two boards now made. As you can see, they are far from flat and level. Lots of different bumps and stuff on them, and that's absolutely fine because that's what we're going to address in the next step. So we've got our two boards. These eventually are going to be cut into 3. I think I'm going to try and get 3 coasters out of each one of these, so I'll make 6 in total. But first, next step we have to do is we have to level them off. So you could do this with a hand plane. I actually have a video somewhere on my channel there, if you have a look, where I make a hardwood chopping board with a hand plane, but it takes a long time and it's kind of difficult to get very nice, flat, smooth results. So that's what I've got this thing over here for. So we'll pan around, and yeah, we have this guy. So this is a leveling jig. So I made this last year when I was making a bunch of chopping boards, and it works pretty well. Basically, there's a bunch of different clamping options and stuff you can do with it. This year we're actually going to be using these little springy wooden strips, which are actually the lats of an old IKEA bed. So they'll kind of give me this little spring force, which I can show you. And so that's held nice and firmly there, and that's not going anywhere. So the next part then is we take this sled contraption that goes on top, that runs along the length of the jig, and then into the sled we can pop our router, which has its own little track in it, and that slides back and forth. So we can slide along, we can slide back and forth. We can stick a leveling bit into the router, and basically that will level off this thing more or less. You know, it's pretty consistent. I'm not going to say it's perfectly level or anything like that, but it gives you a nice consistent surface on one side. You can flip it over, you can then surface the other side, and then you've got this pretty nice level board to work with, which gives pretty good results, at least for chopping boards anyway. So I'm hoping the same logic can apply, that I can use it on these boards, and then I'll be able to cut them into their individual segments and have individual little coasters made out of them. So we shall see how well that works out. I'm not really sure, but we're going to try it anyway and see what happens. So next up, we're going to set this up fully and then turn her on and do some leveling, which also makes an obnoxious amount of dust, which is why I actually just 3D printed this little dust nozzle to fit onto my shop vac the other day. So I haven't tested that out. I actually don't know if it's going to work very well, but we'll see. If it even minimizes any of the dust created, that'll be a win for me.
We're on to our leveling now. So unfortunately, it turned out that with the little dust shoe that comes with the router attached, the router couldn't go low enough to plane off the board, so I couldn't actually use my shop vac at all to try and collect the dust, which was really really disappointing. So it ended up just making a massive mess, as it always does, but you know, I'm willing to accept it because it does just work so well. Last time I was doing this, I didn't even have a shop vac either, so I had to clean up by hand. So at least the cleanup wasn't too bad because I do now own a shop vac, so it wasn't too bad. But yeah, the process worked really well. leveled the boards off nicely, and yeah, they turned out really great. With the leveling done, the surface is pretty good, but it's still not 100% smooth, and the router bit does leave some kind of burn marks on the surface in places. So I needed to do an initial sanding to kind of smooth all that out. So this is just rough sanding with 80 grit sandpaper. I decided to leave them all together to do this sanding because I wanted it to try and get the best sort of most dimensional surface I could across the two pieces while they were all together, as opposed to trying to do them in their smaller pieces, because I figured that might then lead to some more inconsistencies in the thicknesses. Once I was happy with the dimensions, the sort of the overall thicknesses and the rough surface finish, I marked and cut these out. So we now have our 6 coasters cut out, but they're unfinished at this stage. So they need final sanding, they need shaping, and then they need their actual finishing coat put on them. So the main bits that were left really was all the finishing work. So for that, there was a lot of sanding. I'm not going to show you it in gratuitous detail because there was a lot, but mostly just had to clean up the edges and then just spend a lot of time on the two surfaces, moving up through the grits of sandpaper to get a nice smooth finish. As well as that, I decided that I would use a roundover bit on my palm router and give all the corners a nice little chamfer. Well, not a roundover bit, a chamfer bit, I should say. But yeah, just thought that would give it a nice clean look on the outsides. Also wanted it to be a little bit rustic, so they're not perfectly even, but then with the sandpaper I was able to kind of smooth them out and make them look, a little bit handmade as opposed to just machine made. We're on to the final step now. This is the final finishing coat. So we're all sanded nice and smooth. And now we need to protect this wood. It's going to be a coaster, so I wanted to use something that would be fairly water resistant. So I chose to use polyurethane. Now, I never actually used polyurethane before this, and the longest part of this entire build was actually waiting between each coat of poly to make sure that it had dried and set properly. I very much underestimated how long that would actually take. I did get a really good tip, which unfortunately came a little bit too late, which is that you can thin down your polyurethane by mixing it 50-50 with white spirits, and then you end up with basically quite a light solution that you can actually rub on with a lint-free rag. If you do that, you get a really even surface finish and it dries really quickly, and then you can build up the layers of that to give you a nice final finish. You can also reduce the amount of white spirits you use, so you can increase the amount of poly in it in later coats, and you end up with really even, really clean finishes. I wish I'd known that at the start, because it probably would have sped this whole thing up and I probably would have gotten better surface finishes, but live and learn. I'm going to use that for anything I do in future when I'm using polyurethane. For the last little bit here, I wanted to do a little bit of personalizing on the pieces. So I added my signature onto the pieces, and I also wrote a little message on one of them. For this, I just used a normal permanent marker, and unfortunately it didn't really work out very well. So I wanted to do it between layers of polyurethane so that it wouldn't soak into the wood, but it would also be sort of like sealed in between the layers. Only problem with this was that when I went to recoat over the top of the permanent marker with the next layer of poly, the solvents in the mix sort of dissolved the marker a little bit, and it kind of ran as I was painting on the poly. So it doesn't look amazing. It's still obvious what it is. It's not become unintelligible or anything like that, but it's just not as clean as I would have liked it to be. Yet again, another learning experience of using polyurethane. Aside from that, then really it's just a matter of building up the coats on top of this so that I can get these kind of final pieces, final finishes that are almost like glass hard and will give me like real nice shine and be smooth and water resistant. So the very last bit of work I have to do on this is make Chris's sort of hero piece. And this is where I want to bring in that Warhammer 40k theme. So Chris builds the faction, the Blood Angels. So what I found was on Thingiverse, I found this little stencil that is the Blood Angels insignia. So my idea for this one is, so this is the coaster that had my message written on the back of it. So for this one, on the other side, on that front side, I want to try and stencil onto it the Blood Angels insignia. I had first thought that I had for this is that I might be able to just hand paint it on with the stencil. That didn't work very well at all, so I just had to rub it off. Thankfully, because the urethane had set pretty hard on that top surface, I was able to just wipe the wet paint off and go with another approach. So for the second try of this, I taped it down quite well, masked it off, and then sprayed the insignia on with some spray paint. That was almost the last thing I had to do. The final step then was, once that spray paint had set, I was able to remove the stencil, and then I was able to give it a coat of clear lacquer, which was to hopefully just seal the whole thing in place so that the insignia won't just rub off. Had a little bit of trouble with that. The lacquer reacted with the urethane, and there was this weird sort of bubbling effect, something to do with moisture maybe, or just different chemical reaction. I was able to then though come in on top of that again with a final coat of urethane over the top, which sort of filled in the gaps, but in the final finish you can still see a couple of little kind of bubbles or ridges on it, which is unfortunate because this was meant to be the real nice pretty hero piece. But it is what it is. It still is obvious what it is. Well, if you're a Warhammer fan, it's probably obvious what it is. It's still clearly visible. So that's all that really matters in the end. As a final, very, very last step before I posted them, once these had dried nice and hard, I brought them all in and stuck some little felt pads onto the bottom of them to act as feet. They do sit flush on the surface anyway, but especially with the urethane being tiny little bit sticky still for a while, I thought this would just be a good idea so that it didn't stick to anyone's tables or anything like that. And it just means that they're a little bit softer on whatever surface you put them on. And yeah, so that is it for this project. Our coasters are made. They've been sent off in the post to Chris. So yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing this whole process. And to Chris, I hope you really enjoy your Secret Santa present. And I hope you really enjoyed seeing how it was made. So yeah, happy Christmas. And I'll see you guys in the next one.